Welcome. So in this video, I am going to do the buy, borrow, die audit on Broadcom. When I am looking at a buy, borrow, die audit, I'm checking several things with the company. Because buy, borrow, die is utterly useless without the right assets. You cannot borrow against an asset that is not outperforming the money supply. So I am focused on, is this company's earnings, its cash flow going higher and faster than the money supply? Is the company got pricing power? Is it a monopoly? Is it adaptable? This is what we're looking at when we are looking at the company. So let's look at Broadcom. Broadcom is quite a complicated company just because it is sort of two companies in one. I would actually argue Broadcom is the largest private equity company on earth. That's an exaggeration, but it has actually got a private equity model, even though it's a public company. It has actually acquired 4 companies and most recently acquired VMware. This is on top of its actual main business, which is the chips that it designs and its cables and its analog physics that it has, which is its true moat. So let's go into it. So what exactly is its main moat? I'm not going to sit here and pretend I am like an engineer that understands the details of chips and how they operate and how they work, but I got the general basis of how it works. And you will too. Let's not pretend Wall Street know themselves, okay? But we understand business. If we understand business, that's going to help us decide if it is an investable company. So let's go into it. I would say 2 companies on earth have the sort of Coca-Cola recipe for analog physics. One of the companies is Broadcom, and Broadcom's main competitor is Marvell, who also share the same technology. So that makes you say, well, Broadcom must not be a monopoly because Marvell exists. I would actually argue this is a good thing that Marvell exists because it proves that they are legally not a monopoly, so therefore they cannot be shut down and broken up. Just to put it into perspective, Broadcom's market cap is about 1.6 trillion and Marvell's is about 80 billion. So Broadcom is much, much, much larger. At the moment of making this video, it has a trailing PE of about 70. So it looks expensive, but we don't care about PE ratios because a PE ratio is kind of useless if you don't know how fast the company is growing and you don't know the details of the cash flow from the company. But as far as the financials of Broadcom, it is absolutely obliterating the money supply. It is roughly generating about 40% of its cash coming in into free cash flow, which is absurd. It really is absurd. Even for a company to get a net margin of 40% just on its net income is very, very difficult to achieve. I mean, only very few companies can do that. Maybe like Visa, MasterCard, Meta has achieved a 40% margin. But to turn it into free cash flow at 40% is massive, massive amount. This is because Broadcom doesn't actually spend so much money on capital expenditure. It doesn't have a lot of reinvestment because the business model is so strong. You see, Broadcom are like a co-engineer for a hyperscaler. Let's imagine Google, who want to build chips. They have the architecture and Broadcom helps them engineer that. Broadcom doesn't actually hold and manufacture stock. They just send the blueprints to TSMC and TSMC make it. This is fantastic business model because the company isn't holding stock, isn't actually building products and hoping people buy them. It's like a made to order business model, which is fantastic. Even Nvidia doesn't do that. Nvidia makes the products and hopes people buy them. Obviously, they're getting sold out and they're going to be sold out for the next couple of years. And I'm not, Nvidia's a solid company as well, but it just shows you Broadcom has a specific model which is even stronger in that regard. So this technology, what is this chip doing? Effectively, the chip is performing billions of calculations to clean the data signal at light speed. So it's effectively affecting 51 terabytes a second. Yeah, so it's our Tomahawk. Think of it, the way I think of it is like a traffic coordinator. They're coordinating all the traffic. When you clicked in this YouTube video, you probably touched a Broadcom chip 6 times between clicking on the video loading up. That is what the monopoly really is. 99% of all internet traffic is touching a Broadcom chip. So that is one of the biggest factors we need to look at, is how dominant and how ingrained it is into the internet when it comes to Broadcom. What I really like about Broadcom is, in comparison to Nvidia, which is Broadcom's main competitor along with Marvell, but Nvidia is the dominant force right now. That is because the focus with AI is on training. So we're focusing so much on training the AI models. And to do that, companies in hyperscalers are using Nvidia. However, the future is going to move to inference, which is getting the AI to do the work. It's no longer about training, but it might be like 90% of completing the work, which is inference. Broadcom is about 70% cheaper for inference. You can use Nvidia to do this, but that's the same as using a Ferrari to do DoorDash. Gets the job done, but it's costing a fortune. And the hyperscalers are the most ruthless capitalists on earth. They are not wanting to pay Nvidia an 85% gross margin forever. That is just not effective. And we've already found proof that AI can exist without Nvidia entirely. Google are the evidence of that. Google Gemini is the proof that AI can be developed without Nvidia. You can do it with your own chips, and that's what Broadcom are doing. Broadcom are positioning themselves as a partnership with the hyperscaler, not just gouging them, price gouging the hyperscalers like Nvidia is doing with their products. Because Nvidia has such a monopoly right now, during the training phase, they are charging these hyperscalers whatever they want. And that just cannot be sustainable. It's not sustainable long term. So the future is going to move to inference rather than training. And that is where Broadcom is positioned perfectly for that. So that is why we are investing for the future. And we're looking at Broadcom. It has so much potential for that phase. And even at before I made this video, Google have announced 185 billion in capital expenditure. So they are going to be investing heavily in AI. And who's going to get that money? That money will be going to Broadcom. I'll have much of that because they don't actually use Nvidia whatsoever. Who else doesn't even use Nvidia? Apple. Apple make their own chips, and they themselves have tried to avoid even paying Broadcom. Apple has more money than any company on earth. They will go direct to suppliers. They will do everything themselves if they could, but they have run into the same problem of the physics that Broadcom possess. They cannot breach this analog physics, and the moat is just impenetrable, because if Apple can't do it, I would argue no one can do it. Okay, so Apple tried and failed. There's just too many patents. There's just too much physics involved in it that they couldn't do it. Okay, there's only two companies. Marvell can do it and Broadcom can do it. Nvidia can do the same thing, just not at the same distance. So Nvidia has NVLink, which can do like 1 to 2 meters, but Broadcom and Marvell can do like 100 plus meters. And if you have a giant data center with 100,000 GPUs, you need to have Broadcom installed to do that. Okay, because you cannot. The data center is just too large. Okay, so that is the moat and the positioning that Broadcom is in right now. So as far as the financials, we're looking at a projected free cash flow of about 45 billion for next year's full financial years. This is a combination of Google spending money on CapEx, and we also have Meta. Meta is in close partnership with Broadcom as well. They're looking to make their own chips. We have ByteDance, TikTok. We have OpenAI. And there is rumours more for Apple. Apple looking to develop an AI chip. And they are in potential talks with Broadcom. That could be another huge client for Broadcom. So they have the whole AI chips going on. Then they have the private equity model. So Broadcom is just basically printing money at light speed. It is just a dominant business model. And a lot of the private equity, I call it private equity, but really it's just acquiring software companies. They're acquiring software companies like VMware, and they fire Hock Tan, who's the CEO of Broadcom. He fires the HR department, he fires the sales team, he fires the marketing team, and then he just puts prices up by 600%. Because why does he need a sales team if the company is a monopoly? You know, just the sales process is sending the company a renewal bill that they have to pay. If they don't pay it, then they can retrain their entire business, which could take 5 years. So he is buying companies that are dependent. Okay, these companies that are dependent on, these are Fortune 500 companies. So fantastic execution by Hock Tan. So what are the risks with Broadcom? Broadcom does have a potential key man risk. See, Hock Tan is a unique combination of an MIT engineer with a Harvard MBA. So he's a finance guy, but he also understands the technology. That's very difficult to replace. And he's very good at executing the private equity model. So to replace Hock Tan is very difficult. He is 73. So what will happen when he retires? That is a question. What my prediction would be is they might stop doing the private equity model, because buying another company $80 billion, if they get that wrong, if the next person gets that wrong, it's too much risk. So I think the company will slowly become more of a dividend yielding stock. They'll focus on buybacks, and it'll just become a yield monster without Hock Tan. And they'll probably stop doing acquisitions. That's potentially my prediction. The other, obviously, risk is if China invades Taiwan. That's a risk for the entire chip market, the entire global economy, obviously. But obviously, with TSMC is in Taiwan, that I should have noted that down. So obviously, Marvell is a competitor. However, the problem with Marvell is because they don't have the volume, they're not going to be first in line at TSMC. You see, in business, whoever is the biggest buyer gets first dibs on the products. And who is the largest buyers from TSMC? Well, that's Apple, that's Nvidia, AMD, Broadcom. Okay, these companies are first in line. So even if a startup tomorrow created the exact same technology as Broadcom, they couldn't get the product made from TSMC. They're just too small. They have no chance. So that in itself is a protection, because they have such a strong relationship with TSMC. Okay. The other biggest risk to Broadcom is the actual customer themselves, the hyperscaler trying to do it themselves. That's what Apple tried to do, and they couldn't do it. Okay, that just shows you that it's a physics challenge, not necessarily a coding issue or a software issue. That is why Broadcom is so strongly positioned. And it's so strongly positioned because it is the alternative to Nvidia. It gives a hyperscaler independence. Google has full independence from Nvidia, so they don't need to be forced into these extreme high margin costs and using Ferraris to do Uber Eats. That's the way I would summarize it in a sentence. So as far as the financials, okay, we'll look at the financials. You're getting a 0.78% dividend. Dependent, there's many ways people like to value the company. I like to use the Chris Hohn shareholder return method. So he uses a hurdle rate of 15%. Let's say Next year's market free cash flow is 45 billion. You're looking at a free cash flow yield of say 2.85%, growth rate 20, your 22.85% shareholder return. That is very, very conservative because the company's growing so much faster than 20% because of AI. All the hyperscalers are going to slowly move to inference. Broadcom is positioned perfectly for that. Broadcom is positioned perfectly for humanoid robots because it's like the nervous system for the technology. Very, very, very strong company. One of the largest companies in the world and positioned very strongly because of its physics, its financials. It is just a machine. And it is less volatile than Nvidia and AMD. Its beta is about 1.22 when I made the video. Nvidia is about 2.27, so a bit, double the volatility with Nvidia. So we're getting volatility, obviously. That's just going to come with this market, but it's not as volatile as some of its competitors in the same industry. So we are looking at it from a business perspective. If you are a hyperscaler, you are saying to yourself, okay, we cannot spend this much. The money on the energy is too expensive with Nvidia. We can save money with Broadcom. It's about 50 to 70% cheaper over a 10-year period if you're talking about the energy usage and they're customizing the chips with Broadcom. Okay, so Google is just the IP on the chips is shared with Broadcom in a sense because they're co-designing it together as a team, and that is so much stronger than just creating a product and selling it. So Broadcom, very, very strongly positioned. I'm very confident over the next 10 years for Broadcom. It's just so ingrained into the internet that it's just, you could rip it out and change it, but it would be so complicated and it's just not worth the hassle at this point. So that in itself is such a strong moat that I like. It's also, keep in mind as well, when you're looking at the cash flow for the cash flow statements for Broadcom, VMware has a tax write-offs of like 3 billion a quarter. That is not real. That's like just write off to reduce the tax bill. That's why we don't always focus on the PE ratio, because there's things there that don't give you the true reflection. Like, we like to look at the free cash flow and we look at the cash coming into the company. So Broadcom, I would say, yes, it qualifies for a buy, borrow, die stock. Very strong company, very strongly positioned. Even without Hock Tan, I think it can be replaced by someone that's just a ruthless CFO, financial person who can just maintain the company and maintain its monopoly. So, hope you enjoyed the video. That's Broadcom Audit, and I'm going to make more of these videos on the specific companies, because that is what matters when you're trying to do this buy, borrow, die method. It's all about the assets that you hold, because we can't just simply borrow against the S&P 500 and get a 10% return. That is not good enough to borrow against. It's really just a high beta savings account. You're not investing. If you're investing into the S&P 500, you might think you're investing, you're actually a saver. You're not an investor. Harsh truth, but it's reality. It is the safe option, but the system, this world rewards risk. It rewards concentration. But if we do our due diligence, we do our work, and we keep an eye on the company, we keep an eye on it, the financials, and the financials are doing well, that's all that matters. We don't care so much about the volatility of the stock price. We keep a very safe margin if we're borrowing against the company, very conservative, and we're responsible. Okay, so if you like the video, leave a comment, and I'll be making more on each company soon.